Prime icons have been released into FIFA 23 finally, and today we're going to be looking at every single prime icon in this tier list and ranking them all. It will be split into two different tier lists as well, as unfortunately we can't get all of them in one, blame Tiermaker, but we have got the first batch of players right now, and we'll be going through a few prices, obviously taking a little bit more of a look on the bigger players and some that you'd probably suspect to be relatively decent. So we're going to start off with some big hitters in this, and obviously the man with the dreads is always going to be first. Hullet, every year without fail, is outstanding, and this year is no different. He's coming in at a whopping, if we have a look at the price list, he's coming in a whopping 7.7 million coins, and I will say this, he is worth every single penny. Same as R9, same as Pele, same as Zidane. They are phenomenal for a reason. If we can find anyone else in this, I believe we've got Garincha, who is a very good player. Maldini is obviously staring at me, and it looks like we're going to have a good second half of this with Maldini as the next one. Again, probably in my eyes one of the best centre backs you can get in the game currently. Like, incredible. Team of the season definitely have people that are of the level, most definitely. Team of the year have people of a Maldini level, but Maldini's just general in-game stats, everything about him is very, very hard to match. And this year, defenders are cheaper than ever. Maldini's coming in at a whopping 1.9 already. This is normally a 3 to 4 million centre-back, I believe, in most years. Centre-backs, left-backs, right-backs, definitely not as much as previous years. And you could say the same for pretty much icons in general. We're seeing a hell of a lot of a price decrease from these players compared to previous years. Again, we have got some that are personally just not worth it. If we're having a look at a few here, personally, if I'm looking down the list, Litmanen, unfortunately, is just not going to do a service for anybody. Lineker, again, not necessarily the worst icon that you could get, but again, not necessarily the best either. There is plenty of strikers out there that can do that job. And it's the same with a lot of these players, and this is where personally icons are becoming less and less needed, bar from maybe the top 10, the top 15. They are the ones that will always be relevant. Your R9s, your Cantonars, your Garinchas to some extent, and then you go for your Maldinis because they are top 1% of each of their positions. You look at the Eusebio, who I cannot believe escaped me. He is a top 1% striker. Mbappe is. CR7 back in the day was. Messi was. You've then looking at your Haalands. You're now looking at, like I say, your Mbappes. There is only so many players out there in just a gold market, in an icon market, in a special, that will actually be everybody's wants. Some people might like Giroud's new World Cup stories, but there's going to be a 90% of people that don't. So with these players, the icons that obviously are a million and above are the best 1%. You look at the difference with primes already. We've been out about a week, maybe at max. We have got, if you're looking for coaching service, foot champs, rivals, or just looking for generic coins, 100k, 500k, a mil, I recommend using SkyCoach at skycoach.gg. Link will be in the description, and make sure on your checkout to use the code JT11 for a discount on your order. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 players above a mil. Yes, then you look at the top percent, you've got about 6 to 7 that are above 2 mil, but that is crazy that they've already dropped this much in the game. Absolutely nuts to see, most definitely. If we then take a look at a few others, one that actually is a very, very big card right now, the interesting point actually is anybody extinct. I feel like there probably is. In fact, there is about 10 players that are currently extinct still on the market, Matthias being one of them, again cracking, so that number may actually be a little bit more because they have screwed up some of the players kind of transfer market price. So you may see a Cantona, for instance, if we use him as an example. He is currently coming in at 2.3 mil. If I can change the screen over, he's currently in at 2.3 mil. That is his max price. He more than likely is a 3 to 3.5 million player right now. Yes, that will drop over time, but at the moment he is that current price, so he is actually technically extinct in the game. If we then take a quick look at some more, we then have the likes of Baggio. He has got a World Cup card that personally I believe has a better either weak foot or skill move. I think it's a solid card, but most definitely not necessarily going to be in many people's teams. Baresi, another solid shout, a good centre-back in terms of defensive ability, but pace will always let this card down like many of the centre-backs. For me, you look at some of these paces, we've got Campbell, 80 pace, 80 pace. With a Shadow, that goes up to 88. With an Anchor, that goes up to 84. If we then look a little bit further down, as we get all the centre-backs, Desai can go up to 91 pace. Yes, Baresi has, 95 base defending. Very, very solid. But in terms of having to put the Shadow on, you are not going to get the big benefits of going up to 99 defending. More than likely, caps out at 97, 98 defending, but you get the 78 pace. Compared to Campbell, he'll get 95, 96 defending, but 88 pace is going to be more beneficial in the long run. And that is personally where these sort of centre-backs really lie for me. I think there is definitely better than previous. Desai has always been incredible as a centre-back. If we then look a bit further down, again, very similar scenario for Herrero, 73 pace, had a wonderful card last year in his moments, but unfortunately doesn't hit the bill on this one. I'm going to keep him in B just for now. If we then have a look a bit further down, I was wondering if we had a Bobby Moore here, but I feel like this is the first letter of the alphabets, and we'll go into the second in the second part of this tier list. If we're looking at other centre-backs, I think we've about covered it. Rio, always a good centre-back, but most definitely this year not as meta-relevant as what we've seen in previous years. His base was always fantastic. Mid was semi-good. Prime normally pretty good. And the moments is normally the best, which you really like. Unfortunately, moments at the moment is a no-go. There's apparently campaigns, so we'll see how that goes in the coming months. Blanc, this is where an exception for Blanc is. He is a phenomenal centre-back, and sometimes it's just down to in-games, hence why I personally think Maldini, realistically, there is players with the exact stats. There's some with better passing, there's some with better dribbling, and yet he still is my personal favourite in the game, and hence why he is 3 to 4 million coins, 1 to 2 million coins still in this game. You can go get Virgil and he'll do a fantastic job and he'll do similar things, but Maldini's in games are just as good, and same with Blanc. In game, absolutely phenomenal. So then if we have a look at a few other players, obviously we've gone through a few players. Lineker, I don't know if he was in already before, but again, not necessarily relevant. In terms of players in this list that are top level, I've seen a few that I've kind of gone through. Garincha, always one, S tier. Eto, I think, is new in there, S tier 100%. And I think with a lot of these players, especially in the S tier, I personally like them because they are what I normally call pick up and play players. They are somebody who everybody can use no matter how good or bad you are. They will give you their best no matter what. Cruyff is a great example of this. Every version of Cruyff is just indispensable. If you can get him in any version, you have got a solid top end of game player, no matter if it's the base version already. Yes, you will find players who will give you the same sort of output of the base player. If you get to the prime, then you're in next level, really. But he is just amazing. A 5-star, incredible. Georgie Best, Jairzinho, again, two massive hitters to kind of rival that Garincha at 94. And again, both of them will give you very, very similar outputs. There is very little differences between a 92 to 94, especially when they are the prime of that icon and are meant to be good in the game. We see a lot of them crack in pace. Obviously, Garincha's a little bit less. Shooting-wise, Best and Jairzinho definitely work it, but it's the passing and the dribbling that Garincha really nails down. And then it goes to body type, it goes to skill move and weak foot. There is very little differences between the lot of them, and that's why you kind of see just a variation of all of them. They are hard to get. I'm not by any means saying that they're easy to get, because they all are a hefty bit of coins. If we then look a bit further down, we have two left back, right backs from Brazil, Carlos Alberto and Roberto Carlos. Again, top of their field. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the only left back and right backs you can get. Personally, you can go with Gold Ferland Mendy and obviously Gold Walker, and they will give you a very good output. As we get into team of the season, probably not as much. If you're going against a 99 pace winger, a 95 shooter, 99 dribble, they are going to start to feel less and less important in the game, and that is where a Roberto Carlos, a Carlos Alberto, the team of the seasons, the informs that have got 5+ on them, that is where you're going to really need that upgrade from them. But for right now, we're in the end of December, you've still got the ability to have some golds, and most definitely will rival the cost efficiency between paying 500k for a left back and 5k for a left back. Again, more videos on that will be coming soon, so definitely check them out in the channel if you want to subscribe. We'll be kind of breaking down 50k and 100k players as well as position based. In terms of the next player we're looking at, we've got a few to rattle through here, so we're going to start just whacking people in. Closer. Again, I don't really need too much explanation on him. Unfortunately, just isn't it this year. Most years, unfortunately, he just lacks that little bit of ability. Laudrup, I'd definitely say his World Cup is 100% better. Prime, not as much. Larson, surprisingly, not a bad striker. But again, he's not going to compete with the Etos, the Drogbas, the R9s, the Peles. And Drogba, if it was lengthy meta, this guy would have been just so much clearer of most strikers. Unfortunately, that has been patched for him, but is still a monster in that up front. Same with Butra. Again, a cracking striker, very easy to play with. Great pace, dribbling, shooting's good, passing's decent. He has got that ability. Bergkamp, unfortunately, I'm going to go with B for him, but I do think he's very easily dropped into that C if you are not using him the correct way. I feel like for me, and personally, I've made the same mistake with him. Just trying to run through with him is impossible. He isn't that sort of player. Very good on his passing. His dribbling, his little touches here, there, and everywhere work really well. So you have to use him in that style. Kaka, another cracking player, straight in that AS. I love the Brazilians. Henry this year, again, is a wonderful card. I think most years, he's just not had that spark that Henry definitely should have. I think this year is most definitely better than most. He just naturally feels really good in this game. Essien, again, always a cracking player. He is going into that S. I feel like ASS would have been nice for him, but in terms of CDMs and icons, I feel like he's one of the best ones you can get. Keane, surprisingly, stat-wise, doesn't look very appealing. The pace is a little bit low. The physical is very nice, as we kind of expect. I think for me, he would go in the A, and he'd probably stay there, and that's about it. If we're then looking at the Balaks, again, not quite got to the Vieira and Hullet stage, but most definitely just under them in terms of his ability as a DM. And obviously, if you are looking for a solid kind of box-to-box, you whack that Shadow on, 89 pace, probably about 86, 87 defending. He's got a very good, well-round stat that works really well, and being tall always works well in the game for headers, physicality, and all of that good stuff. If we're then looking a bit further down at Lahm, personally, I don't rate him as a right back. I don't like him. I feel he's too clunky, doesn't necessarily get the tackles in. He's got a great stat on him, great rating on him, but I much prefer him in that CDM role, which is where I think for me he would drop up, or go up in fact, to the AAS. As a right back, unfortunately, it just doesn't work for me. Cole, again, a solid one. Unfortunately, we do have the likes of Furlan Mendy, who is 4 to 5k by now, and he can do everything. He can do exactly the same as Cole, and sometimes better. That for me is a problem, and that is why we are seeing icons now at 80k already. To say icons don't normally drop this early in the game is an understatement. We normally do not see an 80k, and I don't think that's absolute. It might actually be absolute minimum, but that is Litmanen, and hence why he's in the C category. We don't see many icons hit that sort of price so early on, and I'm interested if I could just see Cole on the first page. He is coming in at a whopping, there he is, 396k. So actually keeping a nice price. He is going down currently. So yeah, you are very unlikely to see people buying him to put him in the team purely for the fact that he just is dropping coins. And most of these prime icons, bar from maybe the top of the top, are going to drop heavily over the next few months. Once we get team of the year, once we start getting more and more packs being opened, these they'll drop loads. They will be absolutely on the floor, mainly because of their chemistry and obviously only getting their nation and not leagues. Again, that's a big factor that I think is probably more relevant than you think. Coleman coming in again, CDM more than anything. Centre back, no good. CDM, absolutely brilliant. We've got the shooting, the defending, the physical. Dribbling's okay. Great passing. You add a bit of a shadow on him. You're looking at a very nice CDM there. Centre back, never really been the position for me for him. Crespo coming in, I'd say AS at a minimum. Again, a striker that isn't necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but most definitely can produce some wonderful stuff. If then we're looking a bit further down, we're nearly finished this first set. We have got Lampard. unfortunately for me, just doesn't do it. I'd probably put Gerrard in the same category, but I'm going to put Gerrard one above, as I actually prefer him a little bit in this game, but most definitely by no means he is incredible at all. Barnes, great pace on that left wing, can be moved into that cam role with his alternative position, which I think saves this card personally for me. I think he goes into that A just for that little bit about him, but most definitely doesn't go above that, and more than likely will drop down into the C over the course of the next couple of months. If then we look at a Del P, always a cracking Del P. I'd say his base for me is always the most efficient in terms of the rating wise, because we get him straight away in the game. If you do manage to get a Del P instantly, he will have a great benefit, whereas now we've got a lot of strikers that do almost kind of take over him in gold, inform, special aspects, but icon wise is definitely a better card. If we then look at the last few, we've got Beckham, Cech, Dalglish, Gattuso. Personally, for me, Cech has never been fantastic. I don't know what it is with this keeper. Casillas has always been fantastic. Van der Sar is an absolute goldmine, but Cech just hasn't done it for me. I'm going to go with a B for him. I'm going to be nice. He is necessarily a solid keeper, but I think for the prices, I'd much rather go Alisson, Ederson, Courtois, save my money, because I know Cech is coming in at a solid 320k. I could go buy Courtois for a less than 50 right now. And then that leads us to the final ones. We're going to rattle through these. Kluivert, no. Figo, yes. Figo is a cracking player. If then we're looking at Makalele, again, very much like Essien, not a bad little CDM you can get there. Passing and dribbling's about average. Great defending physicals. You're going to go with the shadow, or at least an anchor, to get that pace up that little bit more. And I think you could see him definitely in that AS, just below Essien in my opinion. And that leads us to the final five. Dalglish, solid striker. They call him King Kenny for a reason, going into that S. And then Beckham, now he can be a cam in this position, most definitely a better option. I think right mid, he's always lost that bit of pace, because he's never been a pace-orientated player. He is most definitely all about the passing, which works really well in this game now, but most definitely more in the middle of the park rather than on that right wing. I think it might be centre mid that he can be. In terms of a centre mid, I'd happily go A. I don't think AS would be the way to go for him. I definitely think A is probably the highest thing he can go with. B for Gattuso. Hadji probably B as well, I'd say, and Hernandez will stick with the A. And that concludes the first list that we've got going on here. If we go and zoom out a little bit, you'll be able to see them all. We are going to do the second half of it, which is the exact same amount of cards. I think it's 48 per one. We're going to be seeing the other half of the names, so definitely want to take a snapshot of that. Come back to that once you see the second part of the list, and let me know any opinions on this first section of it. So now we're in the second half of it. We've actually got some solid players coming in right now. First off, and their first mention, just because I know the retention's going to be good here, Bobby Moore, World Cup version must. Go check the review on the channel, because he has had a massive pace increase. This card is in the mud. His World Cup is actually sensational. Less on Bobby Moore. Then we look at the top players. We look at the Pelés. We look at the Matthiases. Muller was absolutely phenomenal. Puskás obviously is phenomenal. We then see the R9s, the Ronaldinhos, and I believe Pele must be somewhere around here if we can find him. Have I put him in there already? I did. It was a start one. Obviously, doing too long of a video here. But we've got this kind of selection here. And yes, they are not going in that B tier. They are all S tier and a must. All of them coming in over 1 million coins quite easily. And obviously, R9 being the cream of the crop at, I think, 10 million, I want to say I saw him in at. He was coming in at a whopping price, which is by no means less impressive than anything. He's coming in at 10.8 million coins. And again, I'd probably say he's worth it if you can afford him, obviously. Don't remortgage your house to try and get him, because he is most definitely going to drop in price eventually, and hopefully will become viable for some people other than going in draft, but most definitely is worth every single penny. And then obviously Zidane is going to be the last one in this group. I think that is most of the definite S tiers that we don't have to really kind of go on about. You know these players every single year, they are that level. Van der Sar again is going to be coming in at that level as well. A very expensive keeper that you can get, but will give you that output. Base and mid are both very similar in terms of the output as well. always been the most expensive keeper that you can get, and personally a lot of pros do use him or have used him in previous years, which lead everybody to just be that loyal supporter of a Van der Sar in net. Yashin, again, if I can find him right at the end here, always been a fan favourite of obviously having that hat. I don't necessarily always rate him highly, but a nice dynamic. It's different. It's not necessarily everybody's kind of dynamic that you get. It's the same with, for instance, the Pyatt that we got in Winter Wildcard with obviously that Santa Claus hat. And then we move on to not so good players, which is always good. And again, we will kind of break these down further in future videos. So if you want to subscribe, that is always important. But if we look at someone like Nesta, not necessarily going to be in everybody's cup of tea. Pirlo, again, the pace element of him is very much how I always use the Muller effect. In real life, a cracking player. We look at Pirlo and the amount of moments he created is incredible. He's got moment after moment in Champions League, in World Cups, in just normal everyday games. But in FIFA, doesn't work. There's no pace on him. There's no shooting really. There's no defending. There's no physical. He is a passing maestro. And as we go into a game that is more orientated around passing, I'll get that word out eventually, he should be a little bit better. But again, you then have somebody who's got more pace and just a little bit less passing is always going to be more incredible. And the person that comes to mind of a recent example is Winter Wildcard Cruz, a 5-star, great passing, big pace increase, good amount of shooting. He's going to overtake him, and he's half the price of what you can pay. That, for me, is always going to be the problem with these icons that don't have that upgrade ability really at that top level. Same with Puyol. Pace-wise, in the mud. Defending physical, incredible. If you can use him as a jockey, that is going to be perfect. But you are going to have that Vinny Jr., Mbappe, Messi, or Garrincha, or Pele, or anybody that will absolutely take him to the cleaners. That is just unfortunately how this game works. Riquelme, no real kind of ability there as well. Ian Rush, I feel like his shooting's fantastic, but he just doesn't have that ability that most strikers do. Rooney, another great example of an S-tier player right now. Again, not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but for me has always been fantastic going through and actually getting you game winners and scoring a hell of a lot of goals. If we then look a bit further down, Alan Shearer, definitely in the mud. Schmeichel, I'd probably put him in the B to A category. We'll go benefit of the doubt for the A. Again, with keepers, it is all opinion based. You try them out. If they don't work for you, try another one out. There's no reason to hold on to a keeper to expect him to be better. Test another keeper out and you'll find one that personally either doesn't make too many mistakes for you or you are just comfortable having him in the game. Vieira, again, how we missed him. S tier 100%. Very much like a Hullet. He's tall, great defending, great physical, can have a good amount of pace on him, passing's good, dribbling's good, and just natural in-games work really, really well. If we then further down a little bit, we look at a few of the lesser players. Vidic is one that comes to mind. Unfortunately, just doesn't have that ability. He's definitely above the Puyols and the Nestas in terms of pace, but unfortunately isn't quite in that top tier that I'd expect him to be. I think if he was kind of getting above 80, I'd say 82 pace, you're then looking at a very, very top-end centre-back, and that is the margins of these tiers. They are not necessarily massive difference in terms of Maldini is so much better than Vidic, but it's their minor stats of having 5 less pace, 6 less pace, maybe even the argument of 3 less pace, but 1 less defending. It does make a massive difference, and obviously in-games do matter as well. The passing dribbling is non-existent, but we can have a look at in-games more detailed with reviews, obviously. If we then look at a bit further down, Vieri, again, not really there. Righty wasn't terrible, but most definitely not a striker that's on my bucket list. Stoichkov, for me, is one of the most overrated, overlooked icons in the game. A phenomenal player. Not necessarily one you'd handpick out of the selection that we have at the top, but most definitely will give you a very good output in the game. If we then look at Pires, unfortunately doesn't drop a bomb for me. Owen, again, probably at right sort of level. Schweinsteiger is actually a funny one because I think pace-wise is totally irrelevant, but I think when you add everything else around here, you've got a relatively nice player. You're looking at 76 pace, you whack a shadow on him, you get, say, 91 defending. We look at the pace getting a +8, you're looking at, 84 pace. He's not a bad centre mid. His World Cup card, I think, is definitely better because he's in an SBC, so you can obviously get him untradeable. But in terms of this card, it's definitely better than you think because of the overall factor. If you're playing a box-to-box, he could definitely do that role for you. If we then look at Van Basten, again, a striker that is definitely a specific type. I found really good hold-up play from him and not necessarily running through balls, but he has got an absolute wicked strike on him. Then we look at someone like a Van Persie, just missing the pace. I feel like his moments definitely has that little bit of extra. Unfortunately, we won't get that this year, and we've already had a World Cup icon. So is that going to be the most highest rated Van Persie we're going to find? Maybe. We then look at Xavi, very, very similar to the Pirlo, but luckily for him, I suppose, he has got that little bit more pace, which makes him a bit more of a viable option than Pirlo himself. Socrates, always really liked him. Again, very much like Stoichkov in my opinion, a little bit underused compared to what he can do, but again, it all down to untradeable teams. EA kind of forcing you into that untradeable logic, taking all your coins from upgrades, from base icon SBCs, mid, all of them good stuffs that we really kind of gamble on. That unfortunately leads you to go untradeable only. So really, unless you go for the base icon and get, or prime icon and get Socrates, you're not necessarily going out and buying him. If then we continue down the list, Zambrotta, always a fantastic right back. Like I said with the previous Carlos Alberto and Roberto Carlos, there is options other than spending hundreds and hundreds of Ks, but most definitely will not disappoint with him as the right back. Scholes, unfortunately, it pains me to say that he has to go in that C tier. Unfortunately, again, very, very useless in the game. If we then look at the final C tiers, Van Nistelrooy, unfortunately, is in there. Xabi Alonso, I'd probably go more B. I feel like he's got a bit about him, but unfortunately, doesn't really go much more than that. Shevchenko, I'd say A. I do like his World Cup card, and I do think that one is very, very similar. There's only an in-form upgrade at best for him. Hugo Sanchez, again, I think it's the weak foot that screws him up, if anything. But again, a nice, good striker if you are being able to go onto his main foot. We then look a bit further down. Torres, again, a bit underwhelming for me for him. I like his base, his mid and his prime, but unfortunately, don't give me that Torres feel. And I think that's where moments could step in, or at least a campaign. But unfortunately for me, I don't think he is hitting his true potential of what Torres was, especially the Liverpool Torres. I think he definitely should be joining Rooney and all of these players in S tier, but unfortunately he's going to have to stay there. And then we're on to the final few now. So let's get this going. We've got Zanetti, CDM 100% all day long. He definitely goes in that A. I personally am not a big fan. Like Lahm as a right back, he is definitely more a CDM than anything, and that's where normally the moments would have stepped in and put him in that CDM, but he does have the alternative position, which really, really works. Rivaldo, unfortunately, again, he can't go above A. The 2-star weak foot is just not enough for me to say that he can be in that AS. He's got great ability on the ball, but unfortunately that weak foot is going to hold him back compared to so many wingers, cams, centre mids that just have that extra weak foot. Maybe the bit on the skills, they're a 5-star, have the same stats or even better, and come in a little bit cheaper. Trezeguet, again, not a bad striker, but most definitely not going up there. Suker, probably going there as well, I'd say. Seedorf, I'd say definitely AS. Arguments on his base and mid for S, but I think as we get into this progression of the game, is very, very similar to a lot of cams, and really doesn't have anything that's kind of mind-blowing in terms of the prime. Then we look at Roy Costa, I'd go with an A for him, and then we come down to the final 6. Raul, again, I'd actually say he's quite surprising in terms of a centre-forward / striker. Plays the role of cam centre-forward striker really well. Again, not necessarily a huge amount of price, and will give you a very effective gameplay when using him. Veron, I'd say can't go above B. Will argue that maybe previous versions when we've not necessarily got insane stats on cards, he definitely has a bit more of a play in the game, but now we get into the prime, unfortunately, isn't going to be that one. Rijkaard was actually fantastic in terms of his mid, I want to say. I think his 88 was definitely a solid CDM, and I think holds his price there for me. Very much like Makalele. Nedved, I think back in the start was a solid left mid. This year he definitely has some play down that wing. Gonna have to really go with the Hunter to kind of give him that extra pace increase above to what, 93 I think it would be. And I think in general the shooting would go up as well. Having great passing and dribbling could be a very good asset going down the wing if you don't already have your left wing sold out. Then the final two, Petit. Again, solid CDM, very much like a Zanetti. His moments normally comes in at an absolute clutch. I think he's got a wicked card. If you can whack that shadow on him, you get a good amount of pace increase, great defending, good amount of passing already, physical's nice, tall, very strong center CDM that really works in this game. And finally, Zola coming in a bit under Del P. I think Del P is definitely a better version of Zola, but most definitely Zola comes in at a high price as well. And that finishes off the tier list for you. Let's just show you the kind of cap here. If you want to go check out the previous version, obviously skip back to that and you can do a side-by-side comparison. If you want to open up two of the videos and watch all of them twice, that's always perfect as well. This is going to be my tier list for the primes. Let me know down below if you'd change anybody, and we will be doing future videos on the best value icons you can get in this game. Take care. Peace.